This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Ever get the feeling that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing? Do you ever feel that there are forces beyond your wildest imagination guiding you to fulfill a task or a promise, and all you have to do is listen and go with it? Well, Lori Travis knows exactly what that means. She's an artist. She always kept a journal, so when she had to fulfill a promise to a loved one, she was able to keep a full account of everything that happened, every single sign and nudge from the universe. When she told friends and family, she was encouraged to share her truly unique and unbelievable experience. The name of her book, The Road to the Hike of Lake Hayaha.
I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and we were always dragged to fishing spots or to the mountains to get that love of the outdoor that my parents had. So we'd always gone to Colorado. And then as a young adult, I went there a lot on solo trips just to recharge my batteries. And I went out there one time with my brother, and we were up in the high mountains, and I showed him where I wanted my ashes spread. And I made him promise me, when I die, I need you to spread my ashes in that mountain. And he's like, okay, I'll do it for you if you promise to do it for me. You know, we're young. We think we have our whole life ahead of us. Well, 30 plus years later, I had to fulfill that promise. And so I went out by myself to the Colorado Rocky Mountains and spread his ashes at the lake he wanted it spread. But I got a lot of signs and a lot of obvious slap in the faces from the universe that I wasn't alone and that people were there helping me. So I kind of wrote all about everything that happened.
How old was your brother?
He was 53 when he passed away. So really at the core of it, my book is about love and family and maybe what you're willing to do for that love.
When was it the most difficult?
Probably when I was up there actually doing it. That was probably the most difficult, and how I had to get back down after the fact. And that's when some of my biggest signs and maybe even helpers sent from my brother came and really regenerated me and gave me the strength to go back down. And one other thing is, after my brother passed away, and he suffered from cancer for 7 years. He had 3 different types of cancer. And then 6 months later, my dad passed away. So I was in a pretty dark place. So I went up there, and I had not seen a person the whole time I was hiking up there, which is extremely unusual. And then after I spread the ashes, this gentleman came out of nowhere and asked if he could come down and talk to me. And he prayed with me. And then as I'm sitting there trying to get myself together and wondering if the Rocky Mountain National Park Rescue Squad is going to have to come and help me off the mountain, because I don't even think I have the strength to get off this rock, much less down the mountain again. Another gentleman came to me that kind of had a connection with my brother. And when you read the book, you'll understand it all. It's kind of a longer story than we probably want to get into right now. But as I stood there with him, he said to me, "Boy, this looks like heaven up here, doesn't it?" And it just like blew me away that he said that. Then he asked if he wanted me to sit with him for a while, and I said, "No, I think I'm okay. I really do. I feel a lot better." And he bounced away, told me to have a great day, and then I felt like I had the strength to get myself off that mountain, and a weight was lifted off my shoulder for sure. But the thing was, nobody knew I was going up there, none of my family members except my husband. But everybody was really like, wow, that happened the way it should have happened. You needed to do that by yourself.
Yeah.
And there's some really like obvious slap in the face signs that I was doing it right. Like, I'll give you one example. My father called me Ellie Bell. On my drive out, I was having a full out panic attack. I was ready to turn around and head home, tail tucked between my legs, because I didn't feel like I had the strength to do it. And as this person was passing me on the interstate going super, super fast, and then slowed down, got in front of me to the point where I had to tap my cruise control, I got close enough to their license plate. The license plate said L space Bell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was like, okay, I got you, Dad. I see what you're saying. I need to get my ass back on the road and do what I promised I would do. Just that kind of stuff. A lot of that kind of stuff just always happened. And it always happened when I felt the weakest, and when I felt like I really was like being selfish and doing this for myself and not the real reason why I came out here. It would be like another nudge from the universe just saying, no, 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 you're doing okay. Just keep going. You can do this.
No, you can and you did, Lori. Thank you. Another baby boomer strolls down amnesia lane. That's a title that'll get your attention, right? But W.E. Bill Garrison's book is so much more than a catchy title. It's really a gift to his family filled with some precious memories. Bill.
I wrote it for my kids. It's just really a short little read about my early adult life and how I connected with my soulmate and became a proud father. It kind of goes through the path that I took when I was in the service. I spent 7 years in the Air Force. Um, I wanted my sons to understand how their folks met and what they did on dates and stuff, and I wanted to have them have an idea of what life was like before they showed up.
So, why the whole, amnesia? This sounds like a little biography that you left for your family.
Yes, it is, and actually, I kind of stole that part of the title from the actor Robin Williams. He mentioned it in Dead Poets Society. I wanted them to know that when we meet people, it's very important because we never know when we're going to come across those same people again. And they can become very important connections and part of our lives. I sort of have this perspective that shows if you want to believe in divine guidance, that it can be found in our experiences. But it's just a quick read of a baby boomer recalling important parts of his journey.
Well, I mean, are you interested in people buying this book?
Actually, I was really just wanting it for my sons, and as some of my friends heard about it and reviewed it, and they said, well, you really need to go further with this because there's a lot of people that we think are interested in hearing this kind of thing. A lot of people today, don't spend the time to make connections. We live in a pretty fast world, but when you're thrown into a different society and you don't have family around, you kind of create your own family, and that's what happens in the military life. A lot of people understand that,
Mm-hmm.
and that's sort of what happened in my experience, and I wanted them to be aware of it. So now to answer your question, no, I didn't do this to make money. I don't have any book signing plans. I was just sort of waiting to see how things develop, and I just noticed that the press release was posted, and so that gives me some material that I might work with to see if other people might be interested in reading this.
I talk to a lot of people who just want their kids to know where their parents came from and the things that they went through and the struggles that they had and the joys that they had in bringing them into, the world and
Well, I realized after my parents passed away that there was a lot I didn't know about their early lives together. And then I started questioning myself, and I thought, oh, I just wonder. And I thought that might be something that would happen to my sons at some point.
yeah. How many kids do you
They're,
have?
they're, I have two. Their mother passed away in 2015, and it was after her death that I felt like I needed to get this information to them.
Good call.
We'll see. They seem to have really appreciated. They both let me know in their own different ways that they're really glad that I took the time to do this because it does give them information that they didn't know,
Right.
um, prior to.
You've done a really good
Okay.
thing for your family. I think it's cool.
Thank you.
All right. Charles Nathaniel Smith believes racism remains America's number one nightmare. He's a COO at Tuskegee University, and in an attempt to understand why people are racist, he dissects public schools, higher education, the U.S. military, the government, and the entertainment industry in his book entitled Diversity. Charles.
If those institutions would have done or would do what they could in terms of this agenda, I just believe the country would be different. But we've never had a true conversation about racism, except when things happen, then we go into this reactionary move, and then once those things are quiet, we go back to where we are.
So we have the will when something bad happens. We talk about it, and then as soon as it's passed, we forget about it.
Yes, we go back to where we were because it's a comfort to be where each of us are in terms of dealing with these issues. Because I've heard people tell me that they wish that we didn't have to talk about this. But the reality is, when you don't talk about something that's still there, it doesn't go away. People internalize it, so when things happen, everybody go back to their particular positions about it. I think it's just a quiet killer in America that we just don't talk about.
So what do you think is the most egregious thing happening now?
If you look at colleges and universities around the country, there are always incidents that's popping up. I think you've got folk out there that's quietly have developed this sense of hate about certain groups of people, and in many cases, African Americans, because of all that they hear people talk about in their quiet circles and the things that each may say about different groups. But there's no real opportunity for folk to air their real feelings, to come to some kind of closure and understand what may have happened to generate these kinds of things. This issue of race and racism has been something that we've kept going in America, because we quietly tell one group of people that this other group of people are the cause of their situation. And so people believe that one group is taken away from something they think they're entitled to. It creates issues for folk. And when young folks are growing up believing that some African American student got into college because someone said, well, gave them some preferential treatment or whatever, or somebody got a job. But when you really look at it, it is one race in America that has benefited from what Peggy McIntyre has called white privilege. But folk don't want to talk about that. Even with my friends who are gay and white, when we used to go somewhere, they said, well, such and such. And I would say, well, no. I said, when we walk into a place, no one knows you're gay, but they know I'm black. And so they react to me based on color. They're not reacting to you based on you being gay. Now, once you tell them that you're gay, maybe then they have a different reaction if they don't, approve of you being gay. But when black folk walk into stores, or when we walk into restaurants, people see our color and they start reacting. And so even in my position as an administrator of a university, I've had the occasion to get on the elevator with a white person, a white woman particularly, and she clutches her purse. And I'm standing there kind of, sometimes I laugh about it to myself saying, I probably got more money than you do. But that doesn't matter. So I think that there are things that has happened that we have, because we don't talk about this issue. I think most black people, if they were to be truthful, it bothers them, but we've all learned to kind of move through society and adjust and control our behavior. But I think racism hurts everybody in some way, even though we don't believe it does. I think it does.
So in your book, do you offer suggestions?
At the end of each chapter, there are some recommendations that I make. And a lot of these recommendations are not my recommendations. Those are recommendations that have been made throughout this whole discussion about race over the last maybe 30 years. And they are good suggestions that come from various different groups of people. There was a group that called the Diversity Initiative, and making suggestions about colleges and universities, about cities and things that people should do in terms of focusing on this issue of racism. But it never really got any attention because I think the powers that be didn't really want it to get much attention. And after a while, that group that President Clinton put together that most people don't know anything about, it just disbanded. But in each chapter, I do try to attempt to do a chronological history of what has happened in terms of African American community. And the reason I deal with African Americans, because in this country, I think the biggest issue with racism is still between white people and black people. I strongly believe, and I make this clear in the book, if we can figure out how to deal with this issue of African Americans and whites in America in terms of this racism issue, I think other things will begin to happen, because what I do a chronological history looking at what happened with the civil rights movement, and then what happens with terms of disabled people and ADA law and 503 and all those things began to emerge, how the women's movement really took off and women began to move into different venues that they had never been able to move before. So I think the civil rights movement opened up the avenues for a lot of folk who felt that they had been disenfranchised. So I think if we can attack this issue with African American people, I just believe our country would be so much different, and the brain trust and the power that everybody talk about that we want, I think America would really be this great America. And I believe we have to be an America for everybody.
Hear, hear, Charles. I'd like to think most people would agree with that. Thank you. And thank you for hanging out with us while we take this very, very, very short break. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. You think times have changed for women in the military? Well, Lorraine Newby says, think again. In her book entitled Inheritance, she's determined to encourage women to empower other women to produce a cycle of love and support to lift them above the stereotypes men continue to act on. Lorraine.
I was MX military. And being around different women who has problems, mental problems, and problem of self-esteem. So that's why I wrote it, to bring out all of the butterflies in the women, to let them know who they are and what they're worth, and stop feeling so down about themselves.
Is this common for women in the military?
Yes. But as they get into the military, they find that it's not all what the picture that they had for themselves is not there because of the scrutiny that they get as women. It's not only like in the outside world, as we say in the military, that you get discriminated against, but it is also in the military as well. And I see that it's worse in the military.
You think it's worse in the military?
Yes.
And that women are not treated the same as men?
Oh, exactly. No, they're not, because they feel women are not supposed to be in the military, first of all. That's from the Stone Age days of when they had that. And then when they're recognized in the military, it's so much harder to fight for ranking and for positions. It's just like that on the outside world. And it's same way as in the military. So you push yourself more harder than you can, than you see the men that's you're up against. I'm trying to expose what's on the inside of women to bring it out, for women to get together with women, stop bringing each other down and uplifting each one. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, but uplifting each other with the love that we have in our hearts for each other. So many women that bring each other down. I've seen it as I was in the military. I've seen it in the workforce. It doesn't matter. It's all ethnicity. It's not just one, but it's a time for us to build each other up. Build each other up in love and not tear each other down.
But you know what? Women do that. Women are very territorial, and they do have a tendency to get angry and hang on to their anger and not be supportive and to feel jealousy. And
exactly. It's our nature, but even though it's our nature, you have to know in your heart that we all are the same and everybody is different, but yet and still, we got to find that love that's in our heart to give to each woman and pull that love out of their hearts so we continue to love and not tear each other down. You have these men that write books about women, on how women should be, and I don't get it because I'm a woman and I feel this way. You're a man writing a book. You can't tell me how to be a woman if you're not a woman yourself. You don't have the innermost being that women have, that know that they have been created to be women. And not from a man telling to a woman, but a woman telling a woman their perspective on how women are. And all branch of services, that's how we are, a family. And so is a family that draws everybody together. And the same thing with the women. You gather around that and you uplift each other. It's like a family. For the families that the women didn't have when they were not in the military, or when they're in the world. We call them the world and the military, two different worlds.
Two different worlds, so much alike when it comes to the way women are treated. Thanks, Lorraine. Kayla Ray wrote a book 5 years ago, never expecting to publish it, but family pressure won over. And now she's raising two kids, working on her BS in nursing, and trying to promote her book. It's entitled The Letter.
Honestly, it was just a combination of different experiences me and my friends had gone through over the years. And then I just kind of combined them, twisted facts, and made it way more dramatic. It starts with a single mom losing someone she cares very much about, but because of her past experiences, she is very hesitant to move forward. She feels like she has to prove a lot to herself.
Okay.
And then when the man she cares about is killed on a deployment, his best friend and her kind of cross paths and they kind of figure each other out. Both of them relied very heavily on this person that died to kind of be their anchor. And then they kind of had to figure out how to be their own anchor and as well as just move past everything that happened.
That's a difficult story to write if you haven't experienced it on some level.
Yeah, it took a lot of time. I was in nursing school when I started writing it. And writing has always just kind of been like my way to just like forget about daily stuff. And I had been having drinks with a girlfriend one night and we were kind of rehashing old stories. And the idea just kind of came to me. So I just, in my downtime between studying and clinicals and my kids, I just kind of started working on it here and there. And like I said, it took about 3 years to write completely. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And then I got invited to go to the LA Times Book Fair at USC April 13th and 14th. So we're getting ready for that.
That's great. So that'll be happening in the spring. Were you in college when you wrote this?
Yeah, I was going to a community college for nursing. It was just kind of one of those things. I started writing just to kind of give myself a break from nursing school and kids. And after I'd get them to bed and I'd finish studying, I just kind of pull out my computer and just start writing.
So this was like kind of an escape for you.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a way for me to just decompress.
What's been the best part of this process for you?
I think the most exciting part was when I opened the box and got my first 10 hard copies of the book. Like I had my like come to Jesus moment. I gave all but one to really close family members who kind of were pushing me to do this.
Yeah. Did you ever see yourself as a writer?
Kind of. I mean, the idea of doing it, of publishing another one is not quite as daunting as going through this first one. There were plenty of times where I got kind of overwhelmed.
Right.
And was just like, why am I doing this? Just because, it's one of those things, like, I've always been a believer in, like, you have to be careful in turning something you love into a career because you can burn out. And that's something I didn't want to lose, like, writing as my escape, because I'm a single parent, so I don't get out. I don't have a lot of free time to myself.
Right.
So being able to just pull out my computer and type after my kids are in bed, it kind of allows me to get away without getting away.
There's a lot more destructive things you could be doing.
Yeah, this is cheaper too.
Okay. Finally, Rachel Ferguson has always written as a hobby, and ever since she was a teenager, she has been transfixed by the mythology of vampires. So she decided to add a little twist to your traditional vampire story and lays it out in her first book entitled Chronicles of a Vampire.
One day I just had a lot of time. So I just sat down at the computer and these characters were already there. They just poured out.
How many years ago was that?
2010, I started to write these books.
So you've written 4 books since 2010.
Yes, ma'am. First off, my main character, she's a strong female lead. Back when I first started to write the book, I looked around at popular literature and the entertainment industry and noticed that most all the leading roles were male-dominant. So I wanted a strong female lead and not someone smart, independent, extremely kind, someone real, relatable. Our main character is called Lexis Shine. She goes by Lex. She's a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, and she's already making plans to attend university in the fall. And, well, just fate steps in and everything goes topsy-turvy.
So she's not a vampire yet?
That's one question that I thought about for a while. By the end of chapter 1, she's a vampire. There is a love interest. This book will literally take you around the world. You will meet interesting people.
Why does she become a vampire?
It's not personally her choice. That's one of the traditions I threw out the window, is whether the victim should be bitten by the vampire and then become a vampire. I threw that tradition out the window and decided to go with genetics instead, human genetics within the DNA. The idea is that within the DNA of everyday people, me, you, and everyone, there is a vampire gene within you. And once you reach a certain age of maturity, this vampire gene activates, and pretty much overnight, you are a vampire. And this gene can activate at any time, at any age. You can be 14 or 98 years old, and you're a vampire.
So you could go your whole life and not be a vampire, and then suddenly, when you're an old lady, become a vampire.
Yes, ma'am. That's the idea.
So that means we're all vampires.
In a sense, yes. You can carry the gene with you, and it can stay dormant for generations and then all of a sudden pop up. At the very beginning of the story, she's looking forward to going to university in the fall, and right there at the summer begins, everything goes haywire. She turns by the end of chapter 1, and all these people that she was surrounded with daily that she thought were everyday people, turns out that they're not. And her mother perishes in a house fire. She's on her way to meet a father she never knew existed. By the end of the story, there is a full-out war within the vampire families. And basically, that's what the first book does. It sets up the premise of the following 3 books. And it is all basically full-on action war, who's going to end up leading these families of vampires. I really didn't focus on the love so much because at the time that when I was writing the book, there were plenty of stories out there that mainly focused on the love.
Right.
And growing up, in my household, we went to the movies a lot, and I loved action films. So I put more action than the actual love interest in these books.
Hey, nothing wrong with action, and I love the whole idea of a genetic predisposition to becoming a vampire. Very creative stuff. We are out of time, but certainly not out of authors ready to share their stories, so come back or download the podcast at 710WOR.com. This is the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.